Well, happy Monday. Back at it with Illinois in Focus Daily after a long Thanksgiving break. Hopefully you guys were able to get together with friends and family and enjoy the holidays and the bounty of Thanksgiving. But boy, is there a lot to cover. We've got the latest in the litigation against Illinois' gun ban, with the appeals courts making their case open for the state to file and plaintiffs to file, and whether or not there's going to be a stay on the district court's ruling. We'll tackle that in a segment. We'll also get to some of the latest undercover video that the federal prosecutors released in the Madigan trial, especially where Madigan's saying he's going to sit down with the governor, Pritzker, and let him know what's coming about boards and commissions. But also Madigan asking a favor of a cooperating witness, so we'll tackle that as well. But today is also when the Illinois State Board of Elections are going to proclaim election results, making it official. So we'll really see what voter turnout was. Was it getting close to what they had anticipated, 74%, or did it fall short? But also, how did incumbent, or rather former president and president-elect Donald Trump perform in Illinois? So we'll tackle some of that as well. But obviously, here with Illinois in Focus Daily, I'm Greg Bishop. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Wake up with us each and every weekday morning with America's Talking Network here on YouTube. But you can also go to thecentersquare.com, and for the Illinois page, subscribe to the newsletter to get the headlines in your inbox each and every weekday morning. I believe also you get those on the weekends. But this podcast, you can get it anywhere you get podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus. All right, so coming back, we will tackle the latest in litigation against Illinois' gun and magazine ban in the appeals courts, with filings being made. We'll see what happens there, so stay tuned. That's next up here with Illinois in Focus Daily. Plaintiffs in the challenge to Illinois' gun and magazine ban, pushing against the state's request that the appeals court issue a stay on a district court judge's ruling the law is unconstitutional. Good morning. It's Illinois in Focus Daily after Thanksgiving. I'm Greg Bishop, and on Friday, you had the plaintiffs in the case respond to the state's request for a stay in the challenge of Illinois' gun and magazine ban, where district court judge, federal judge, Stephen McGlynn, ruled that the state's gun and magazine ban was unconstitutional. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. We've been tracking the gun ban litigation all the way through. I was even in the federal court for the 4-day bench trial that took place several months ago in the district court, which ultimately led to District Judge Stephen McGlynn 3 weeks ago saying that the law was unconstitutional. But on his own, he decided to put a stay on that permanent injunction against the law, giving the state 30 days to file an appeal. So now you've got the appeals court having taken this up now, and I do want to correct the record for us here with Illinois in Focus Daily. For the appeals process, I didn't realize that they had filed a separate case number for the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals, and that was filed on the 15th. So let's get into this, all right? So I've got the state's request for a stay in the appeals court, and then the plaintiff's response to that request for a stay while the appeals court deals with this case. So November 8th, that's when federal district judge Stephen McGlynn struck down the law, but put a stay on his ruling. The states filed their intent to appeal in the district court that day. Now, Officially, the state appealed to the Seventh Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals on November 12th. 2 days later, the Federal Appeals Court, they said that a preliminary review of the short records indicates that the judge in the case, the judgment was deficient. They said that a judge must provide relief to which the prevailing party is entitled. In particular, federal civil rules of procedure require, among other things, that an order granting an injunction states its terms specifically and describe in reasonable detail the acts restrained or required. The injunction must be set forth in a document separate from the court's opinion. It goes on to say that the separate judgments entered in these cases fail to provide any relief and merely states that judgment is entered in favor of each of the plaintiffs against certain defendants. Accordingly, it's further ordered that both the appellants and appellees shall file on or before December 2nd, so today, a brief memo stating why this appeal should not be remanded to the district court to enter a proper judgment. Briefing is suspended pending further court order. Again, that was on November 14th when the appeals court said that the judgment was deficient and gave both the state and the plaintiffs in the case until today to file memos why they say it shouldn't be remanded back to the district court for what the appeals court says was proper judgment. But regardless of that, the following day, so November 15th, the state files a motion for a stay in the district court's ruling. So let's go ahead and pull this up because this is the document that the appeals court has in front of them from the states spelling out what they argue is the rationale for having a stay. So they say that the court's decision is badly flawed in its injunction and should be stayed pending appeal. The opinion below fails to faithfully apply this court's decision in Beavis. Indeed, it repeatedly criticizes Beavis. The state goes on to say it cannot be squared with the Supreme Court precedents or the uniform decisions of the courts of appeals applying such precedent, and it would threaten public safety by permitting military-grade weapons to proliferate again in Illinois. The state went on to say in their filing, the court reasoned first that plaintiffs had shown that assault weapons and large capacity magazines, LCMs, are arms within the meaning of the Second Amendment, reasoning that they are owned by millions of Americans and so are in common use, and that assault weapons are not military weapons, given that such weapons can be used in automatic and burst mode, while automatic assault weapons available to civilians cannot. So they're essentially reiterating what the judge had to say. The court should stay the injunction pending appeal, the state says. Defendants are likely to succeed on the merits because the district court's opinion fails to faithfully apply this court's opinion in Beavis and breaks with the unanimous view of the federal courts of appeals that similar regulations on assault weapons and LCMs are consistent with the Second Amendment. The state further said that it is, if it's allowed to take effect. Moreover, the court's injunction will work serious and lasting damage to public safety within Illinois. Defendants request that the court stay the injunction by December 9th, the date on which the district court's stay expires, or administratively stay the injunction pending its further review. So we're getting into some interesting things here where, you know, the legal procedures in these cases being kicked back and forth. You know, should the appeals courts kick the case back down to the district courts in order for the district court to give a clear judgment that the appeals court says isn't being made by the district court? Or is the appeals court going to issue a stay come December 9th? So we've got a couple of different things working here when it comes to the status of Illinois' gun and magazine ban. But further, let's go into some more of what the state has to say here. They say defendants are likely to succeed in the merits. They say plaintiffs failed to show the assault weapons and LCMs are arms covered by the Second Amendment. B, they say the act is consistent with the history and tradition of prohibiting dangerous and unusual weapons. They say that the Fourth Circuit upheld Maryland's assault weapons ban because it was consistent with a long historical tradition of regulating those weapons and were invented for offensive purposes and were ultimately proven to pose exceptional dangers to innocent civilians. The state went on to say that the equitable factors tilt strongly in favor of a stay. Specifically, the damage done to the state and the public interest by a statewide injunction would be significant, while the damage done to plaintiffs by preserving the status quo pending appeal would be minimal. So essentially they're saying that keep the status quo of the law being in effect because the impact on plaintiffs would be, quote, minimal. The breadth of the injunction compounds the harm it'll cause if not stayed. For the second time in 2 years, the state says that the district courts issued an injunction barring enforcement of the act anywhere in the state. The courts did so without making any findings that a statewide injunction was needed to protect plaintiffs' rights, despite this court's instruction that universal injunctions will be appropriate only in rare circumstances. The state goes on to say that the court likewise enjoined defendants from enforcing the act's registration requirement despite conducting no analysis as to the constitutionality of that requirement and the fact that even the Beavis dissents would have found it constitutional. The court justified this decision, the state says, on the ground that the statute, in its view, is facially unconstitutional and not severable, even though it conceded that plaintiffs had not expressly sought such relief. By contrast, the state argued that the threat is of irreparable harm to plaintiffs if a stay is granted pending appeal is minimal. The purpose of a stay pending appeal is to preserve the status quo while litigation proceeds. And plaintiffs, for their part, have not shown, the state says, they will face irreparable harm while the appeals proceeds. They will continue to be able to obtain a wide range of handguns, shotguns, and other weapons for self-defense, including many semi-automatic firearms, and those plaintiffs that own assault weapons and LCMs can continue to possess them. They say in the end, plaintiffs cannot show their interest in obtaining additional lethal weapons is sufficient to overcome the significant interest of the state, and the state have to protect Illinois communities from assault weapons and LCMs pending resolution of this appeal. So that's what the state had to say in their filing for a motion to stay pending appeal. So let's now again get back to the timeline here. So October 19th, November 19th, an order was issued regarding motion to stay injunction pending relief. The appellees shall file a response by November 27th. So that was on Friday. Well, Friday, you have that motion being filed by the plaintiffs in this case, and we'll pull that up so that you can see the case number and such. So here is the plaintiffs filing from Friday, and they go on to say that indeed the Beavis court expressly declined to rule out the possibility that the plaintiffs will find other evidence that demonstrates that its preliminary views were mistaken. So they're talking about the Beavis court, and the court, the appeals court, noted in particular that evidence regarding the construction, function, and application of the firearms and magazines the Protect Illinois Communities Act bans, plus better data on their firing rates, might draw a sharper distinction between the weapons PICA bans and those traditionally reserved for military service, and in fact, might change the analysis altogether. That is precisely what happened, the plaintiffs say. On remand, the parties developed the more comprehensive record that this court contemplated, and one of the most comprehensive records in any Second Amendment challenge post-Bruin. The plaintiffs go on to say that the district court found, as a matter of fact, that the firearms and magazines PICA bans are arms that ordinary people who would keep at home for purposes of self-defense, as opposed to weapons that are not possessed for lawful purposes, are not exclusively or predominantly used in military service, and thus not only are arms under the Second Amendment, but cannot be banned, consistent with this nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. The state had its chance to prove its case, plaintiffs say. It failed. There's no reason to give the state a reprieve and allow it to continue violating the Second Amendment any longer, the plaintiffs say. All in all, PICA bans nearly 1,000 rifles and shotguns, including the most popular models. They go on to say that a stay pending appeal is extraordinary remedy that should issue only in extraordinary circumstances. The court is essentially being asked to second guess on a highly truncated timeline the extensive record, briefing, and argument the district court considered after a trial on the merits. The party seeking a stay, the plaintiffs say, the state must show that it has a significant probability of success on the merits, that it will face irreparable harm absent a stay, and that a stay will not incur the opposing party and will be in the public interest. The state has not made such a case for a stay. They go on to say, contrary, the district court stayed its injunction shall sponte, which means on his own. The state did not ask for a 30-day stay, suggesting that it would have appropriately considered the merits of a motion for a stay pending appeal had the state bothered to ask. The plaintiffs say, instead, the state rushed to the appeals court seeking it should have first sought below. The state has not even tried to show that seeking that relief from the district court would be impracticable. The state likewise identifies no basis to reject the district court's findings. The arms Illinois banned are distinct from military weapons like M16s and exclusively or predominantly used in military service. They go on to say that the state accuses the district court of failing to consider evidence, concluding that the AR-15 and M16 are not at all the same weapon. In fact, the district court issued a nearly 170-page decision discussing the parties' arguments and evidence in great detail. The district court even cited that very evidence of muzzle velocity, rate of fire, accuracy, and projective penetration that the state mysteriously claims the court never reviewed. Goes on to say the court also relied, for example, on evidence demonstrating that military-issued weapons like M16 and M4 are subject to exact standards of military specificity and rigorous quality issuance inspections, whereas semi-automatic only fire like the AR-15 are not, and is considered the undisputed evidence that the AR-15, unlike the M16 and M4, has never been used by any military force on the planet. Plaintiffs go on to say, simply put, the district court came to the common sense and record-backed conclusion that firearms cannot be exclusively or predominantly useful in military services. In fact, not used in military service because it lacks features the military considers critical. Plaintiffs go on to say, as one would expect, in a contest between law-abiding citizens' ability to exercise constitutional rights and the state's interest in enforcing a new restriction on those recently vindicated rights, the remaining factors strongly favor leaving the district court's injunction and the status quo that prevailed in Illinois for decades under PICA came along in place. Indeed, it is the square law of this circuit that infringements of the rights to possess firearms for protection inflict irreparable injury. That's quoting a case of Ezel v. City of Chicago. The state argues that those constitutional injuries do not matter because plaintiffs can obtain a wide range of other weapons for self-defense, but the plaintiffs say the Supreme Court has expressly rejected that argument. That it is permissible to ban the possession of one type of protected firearm so long as the possession of other firearms is allowed. That's a quote from Heller. So it goes on to, and I'm just scrolling through this. I'm reading from my notes rather than directly from the 30-page filing here. But they go on to say, to conclude, we'll pull that up here so you can see this. They go on to say, finally, the district court's injunction is not unbounded, as the state suggests. It applies only to PICA's enforcement against citizens in Illinois who wish to exercise their Second Amendment rights. To the extent that there is any issue with the clarity of the district court's injunction that supports only this court's suggestion for a limited remand so the district court may expedite its judgment, the district courts would undoubtedly extend the 30-day stay it has already entered if such a remand were to take place, so that does nothing to show that the equitable factors tilt in favor of granting the state's premature motion for a stay in this court. So therefore, they say that the court should deny any defendant's applicant's motion. Respectfully submitted. So there you go. That's the latest in the back and forth here. We'll be watching for today if anything else is filed in this appeals court, the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. But we're also still watching to see what the U.S. Supreme Court will do with the case challenging Maryland's gun ban, because clearly that as well is something that is impacting things across the country and what direction they ultimately go with the U.S. Supreme Court in Maryland's gun ban, because that is much more advanced in this judicial system to get some kind of final result. So things still moving here, all right? So that's the latest here. Friday, you had the plaintiffs file their response to the state's motion for a stay of the district court's ruling, while December 9th is the day that the stay is going to be gone if nothing happens with the appeals court. That's coming up. It's December 2nd. Good morning. Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Stay up to date with us here with Illinois in Focus Daily and The Center Square. Get the headlines at thecentersquare.com. The 2024 general election in the books, and the numbers going to be official here in Illinois, with the Illinois State Board of Elections set to proclaim the election results during a State Board of Elections meeting today. Good morning. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Be sure to get the podcast anywhere you get podcasts, Illinois in Focus. And also, wake up with us each and every weekday morning as we break down things you need to know. So let's get into it. Today, the Illinois State Board of Elections is going to release election data. But obviously, in Illinois, you have Vice President Kamala Harris getting the popular vote in the state and getting all 19 of the state's electoral college votes. Even though of 102 counties across the state, all but I think 14 went to Donald Trump. But if you look further down the ballot, you see some interesting things. No Republican state house gains, no Republican congressional gains. It's pretty much status quo, with Democrats maintaining their hold on Illinois congressional seats and Illinois state house seats. Governor J.B. Pritzker, shortly after the election, he shared some of his, election-related thoughts, in particular about how it looked down ballots. But he said, listen, there's going to be a lot of analysis on all of this. And clearly, you're going to have to wait to get some official numbers here. And we're going to get those today from the Illinois State Board of Elections.
Here's what I want to say, though, about Illinois. Interestingly, with all of the improvement that Donald Trump had across the country and in Illinois in terms of his margin, if you look just below that and all the way down the ballot in Illinois, Democrats won every seat in the General Assembly that it already had. And we won in races that I think people didn't expect, at county board races, taking control of the McLean County Board, for example, coroners races. Literally, if you look, people clearly bifurcated, and made decisions different down the ballot than they did at the top of the ballot. And so I'm proud of that. I think that's a result of the policies that Democrats have had in Illinois and the approval of the voters about those.
So Governor Pritzker, again, saying that if you look at the top of the ticket, Trump made some inroads. He got 44% of the votes to Kamala Harris's, 53% or so. So, clearly Donald Trump made inroads, right? But he says, if you look further down, Democrats won state house seats and congressional seats, and they took over the Madison County Board and got coroner seats and such, saying that is a stamp of approval from voters of Democrat policies. Republican State Representative Ryan Spain said, not so fast.
Nothing could be further from that truth. If you look at a national perspective and you see Donald Trump winning each one of these battleground states where billions of dollars were spent, voters were mobilized and were making informed choices. Likewise, you see here in Illinois, a state that was not competitive, that had only, for president, had only one contested congressional election. We have 17 districts, 3 are occupied by Republicans. That's less than 20% of our congressional delegation. And yet Donald Trump, who did not do any work or advertising in this state, took 44% of the vote. That's a far cry from the 3 districts that are represented in Congress, and certainly a far cry from the 1/3 of the legislature that is represented by Republicans. It is not an endorsement of the status quo. It is an indictment of the Democratic gerrymandering and the way that voters have been disenfranchised in the state of Illinois.
So Spain saying that in no way did voters approve of Democratic policies. Because the numbers, how they play out, show, again, Trump getting 44% of the vote, making significant inroads. But that 44% of the vote statewide he says isn't reflective in the seats in Congress. It's not reflective of the seats in the State House because of 17 congressional seats that Illinois has. We keep losing congressional seats because we keep losing population. But of the 17 congressional seats, all but 3 are in Republican hands, and that's, percentage-wise, much smaller than 44%. Then you look at the State House seats that Republicans have, and there again, the percentage is, like 20% or something of, 20-30%, nowhere near the 44%. So what Spain is saying, it's a reflection of the map that Democrats have drawn in the state of Illinois for congressional seats and state house seats that give Democrats favorable position in those particular districts. Look at Illinois' congressional maps. If you've ever taken political studies courses and you've heard about gerrymandering, some of the jurisdictions look very much like a weird worm snake with wings or something that's snaking through, grabbing up urban areas of multiple cities. In particular, Nikki Budzinski's district, for instance. Regardless, gerrymandering is why Republicans say Democrats held on to their seats, while Trump, the Republican presidential candidate, made inroads in Illinois. Back to Pritzker, though. Again, he said that, if you look down ballot, you can see that Democrats did very well, and it was a good sign that voters appreciate the Democrats' priorities.
It's a result of organizing the Democratic Party of Illinois, which was not organized a couple of years ago, right? It was almost moribund if you go back 2.5 years. And so a lot has been done to rebuild the scaffolding and the infrastructure of the party. And remember that Republicans in Illinois were projecting that they would win 5 seats in the General Assembly, and they didn't. And there were a lot of competitive races all across the state, and Democrats fared very well.
So again, the governor talking about the outcome of state house seats, saying that Republicans said they were going to get 5 seats, but they didn't. Here's Republican leader in the Illinois House, Tony McCombie, talking a bit about that.
Yeah, well, the goal was for us to actually gain 5, and we had 2 sleepers. Unfortunately, we were not able to do that. As you all know, the speaker said not only were we going to he was going to gain, those 4, but I think there's even a rumor of 8. So who knows? I'm certainly in a better position because I've held my caucus together. But that just also goes to show again how disenfranchised the voters are with this map. Here we have all of this money spent, 4.5 million or 4.2 million on our end, 20.5 million on their end, with disingenuous ads. You can ask any of our tier 1 candidates, any of our members, how disgusting the ads were. They went way too far this cycle, but it just goes to show how bad the maps are. We had good candidates, we had good plans, and yet here we are only holding 40 seats. I mean, we can't argue with the map. This is Illinois, but we did see about 44,000 additional Republican or votes for the Republican candidate, and unfortunately, we didn't see that in an increase in numbers in our caucus. That being said, now remember, last cycle we had 70,000 more votes for GOP candidates, but the Democrats hold 2/3 of the House. That's a real problem, and if anything shows you, that's that map.
So again, McCombie saying that in no way did Republicans have victory. She's not proclaiming that, but clearly with Donald Trump making inroads in Illinois, you compare that to the outcome of legislative and congressional races that had contests, it's the map that's the problem. Illinois' map, by the way, getting an F of good government groups looking at how redistricting took place after the 2020 census. We'll get official numbers today. Those will be dissected. We'll hear all about voter turnout and be able to go down and look at all of these particular races. And people are going to try to do the crosstabs and look at who voted for who and the makeup of individuals who once were Democrats and who aren't anymore, and that type of thing. So fascinating stuff. We'll be watching it all and reporting out to you here with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Join us each and every weekday morning here as we break down things you need to know to keep going on in your states, right here in Illinois. All right, Illinois in Focus Daily. Get a hold of me anywhere. Just search Bishop on Air. All right, make it happen.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
You too. Safe travels. Good morning. Thanksgiving plans? Good morning. Good morning. Happy Thanksgiving.
That's former State House Speaker Michael Madigan. Before that, co-defendant Mike McLean going into federal court on Wednesday before their Thanksgiving break. They were in court for half the day Wednesday. Then they had Thursday off and they had Friday off. They're back at it today. But last week, they released some undercover video that is extremely compelling in their examination of the testimony from cooperating witness, former Chicago alderman Daniel Solis, where they really opened up some things here, including former House Speaker Michael Madigan asking for favors and also explaining what he's going to tell Pritzker about high-paying boards and commissions. So let's go ahead and get on all of this here with Illinois in Focus Daily. You can get these videos by subscribing, of course, to America's Talking Network. And each day we put up news clips, stuff happening here in Illinois. The live show is there each and every weekday morning, and segments of this show where you can see things individually. So if you want to go back, for instance, and watch the segment we just did about election outcomes, or if you want to watch the segment about the most recent gun ban litigation, you could do that. But let's get into some of the latest wiretap and undercover video that prosecutors showed during the corruption trial of Mike Madigan. So Madigan facing corruption charges with co-defendant Mike McLean. And this coming from what federal prosecutors called Madigan Enterprise, a nearly decade-long scheme to use Madigan's office to get little to do nothing contracts for his friends and associates in exchange for ushering favorable legislation to ComEd, but also working to use his public office to steer business to his private law firm, handling property tax assessments in Chicago and Cook County. But Madigan used intermediaries like his co-defendant, Mike McLean. McLean and Madigan both pleaded not guilty. That's why they're facing a trial right now. But McLean was part of the ComEd 4 last year that was found guilty in all of this. So Daniel Solis, a cooperating witness with the federal prosecutors, explained, his checkered past and how he was approached by the feds with undercover recordings, and then he decided to start working with prosecutors. But here is a tape of Solis meeting with McLean, and this is rather fascinating, the conversation they have.
Is there anything else that we got to be not mention? Reference to the speaker, but anything else that...
I don't know. I know the speaker has a lot of respect for you, so I think it's just in the best interest of trying to get this done. Just not mentioning his name is probably the best.
Okay.
So in the best interest of getting things done, not mentioning the speaker's name's probably best. So that was in November of 2017. About a few weeks later, Solis and McLean meet again.
So how does the speaker deal with all this? Because these are all strong allies.
Well, he does surrogates.
So McLean being asked by Solis of, there's a lot of other people out there that are doing some weird things, and they're working their own deal. How does Madigan, as part of what prosecutors alleged was Madigan Enterprise, deal with these things? More from that, because that came after Solis and McLean were talking about other elected officials they see doing shady stuff.
I just met a guy for breakfast, and he's getting to know Marty, and I said, well, just be careful.
He's very aggressive.
Very aggressive.
And he says and does some things that I think eventually will get him in trouble.
And they're talking about Martin Sandoval, and they also talk about Luis Arroyo. These are two former state legislators who were arrested by the feds and ended up, Arroyo serving time right now for taking a bribe from an undercover operative who was a state senator at the time. Martin Sandoval had his state house offices raided at the state capitol by the feds, and he ended up cooperating with them, but Sandoval also ended up passing away of COVID, I believe, a year after he was ultimately charged and started cooperating with federal prosecutors. More from this tape between McLean and Solis talking about Sandoval and Arroyo.
He doesn't know where. The easiest thing to say is he wants to meet. Let's say you're president of a company. He wants to meet with you. And he's meeting with you, and then he says, "And oh, by the way,
Here's my company."
Yeah, and you go.
Or he'll go, "Where's mine?"
Yeah, right. It's just. So I told this guy today. I said, "You got to have a prover with you all the time. Don't meet with him by yourself."
Yeah.
So, it's just. Some people they say these outrageous things that you can't say anymore.
Well, you know who's very similar to that is Arroyo.
Yeah, he is.
Arroyo would come here with his wife and says, my wife's a lobbyist and for zoning and developers. I said, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I think so. Like I tried to tell Louis not to do that anymore.
Yeah.
But he still does it, and so he just kind of. I heard on the news that the Department of Justice is sending 40 assistant U.S. attorneys into Chicago to help with gangs. These guys don't want to be in the gang. They're going to want to go
They're looking for their future.
Yeah, they want to go after somebody like Arroyo or Chewy or, Sandoval. I mean, and that's what they'll want to do.
Yeah.
They'll want to go after white collar crime.
I'm a little bit. I'm surprised that nothing's happened with them before.
Yeah, because they're too blatant.
Says the guy who's working with federal prosecutors, has an undercover camera capturing that conversation. Fascinating, especially with McLean recognizing that, again, the Trump era DOJ, because this is the tail end of 2017 when they're talking. And the Trump era DOJ was sending 40 extra FBI agents to investigate crime in Chicago, and he said, I don't think they're going to be looking at, gangs. They're going to want to go after the white-collar criminals. And then what happened shortly thereafter, Burke, Solis, Arroyo, Sandoval, the ComEd 4, Madigan being charged. So speaking of, Solis wasn't just getting undercover video of him and McLean. Solis was also getting undercover video of him and Madigan. And ultimately, they had hundreds of recordings that they've played so far, including phone call conversations. But the video's compelling because you see Madigan right there. And in this video, he asks for a favor.
If anything else you're interested, just let me know.
There's one thing you can do.
Okay.
You got Andrew a meeting with, is it?
The Resurrection Project, yes.
And after the meeting, you and Andrew tried to follow up.
We had it in my office, yeah.
Never got return calls.
I'll talk to him.
Just ask him, give Andrew something. Mm-hmm. Give him a chance to show what he can do.
Andrew is Madigan's son, selling insurance products. Again, Madigan leaning into a Chicago alderman saying, there's one thing you can do. You met with this group with my son Andrew. They never called, never got his. So see what you can do to make that happen. All right.
I've helped you in the past. I'm going to continue to help you. And you've been very good to me. And I'm going to help you.
Don't worry about it.
Okay?
These are the two things you're interested in?
Yes.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
Just leave it in my hands.
Okay.
So at that same meeting, though, when Madigan said, there's one thing you can do for me, you had Solis saying, I'm going to continue doing stuff for you. You've been good to me, so I'm going to continue to do stuff for you. But the meeting really was talking about high-paying boards and commissions that Solis wanted to be a part of, and Madigan having a potential sway being able to do that.
When I sit down with Pritzker, that's
tell them here, this is what we want to do.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. No. But I've got good news.
And they go on to talk a lot about developments and good news here for that, and going to steer business to Madigan. And then they talk about the expensive taxpayer-funded boards and commissions that Solis eyed from a list and the salaries they get. And he says he wants one in particular. That's, 6 figures?
The election's coming, and that board, that Commerce Board, would really be it.
Yeah.
You can.
Now you're gonna run again. aren't you?
I'm going to run again and stay 2 years.
Yeah.
But last time I spoke to you, sometimes they hold people for a while.
Yeah.
Until.
No, I've got it in my notes.
Okay, good, good.
When I sit down with Pritzker, you tell him here, this is what we want to do.
Yeah, excellent, excellent.
So again, Madigan saying, hey, yeah, sit down with Pritzker and tell him this is what we want to do with this board and see. So that was before the 2018 election. It was, a midterm election, right? So that was before the 2018 midterm election, which is also the election where Pritzker was up running against Rauner and ultimately won that race. So that was before the election. After the election, Solis meets with Madigan again, and he's got 3 things he needs to tell him, and in particular. But Madigan, again, at the tail end of the conversation, talking about how he's going to sit down with Pritzker and tell him what's up with these boards and commissions.
I want to let Pritzker know what's coming.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
Now that doesn't have to be in writing. I can just verbally tell him, look, as we go on with these boards and commissions.
And it goes on and talks about that. So let's get here now in this particular tape, which is November 23rd of 2018, again, after the midterm election in 2018. Solis, Chicago alderman, facing the municipal elections months after the fact, saying, you know what, I know I said I was going to run again, but
Number one is that
he's not going to run again. He also updated him on some of the other development situations. So, one of the developments was not coming together that they had talked about previously. But again, he told Madigan, I'm not running for a re-election.
second, and I think you might be a little surprised on this, I've decided not to run.
Okay, that was my second thought when I was looking at your name on the schedule, because I said, well, he may be coming to ask to help in his election, or since he didn't file on day one.
Yeah, but
Well, I'm not surprised.
well, the mayor retiring, that also. And what am I doing? It's going to be a very interesting, to say the least, city council next year.
Yeah, that's my view of it. Right.
You know.
I have this thought. Under the law, the council is stronger than the mayor. Under the
Oh
law.
yeah, and theoretically, I think that's what's gonna
Yeah,
happen.
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm seeing and thinking.
I'm telling Chewy, even though you're going to be in Congress, I think you're going to have a lot of influence because everybody wants to be a progressive. Line up to them.
Yeah, right.
Progressives, Latino caucus.
I tell people, I say, listen, I like Shuey, but a progressive, I'm not so sure.
I'm the same way. I don't know if you know the guy that ran his campaign, Manny Perez, young kid, went to Princeton. I was with Manny. I says, Manny, what's a progressive? And he goes, I don't know. he doesn't understand it either. But he's just riding the wave, just riding the wave. So anyway, so that's the second point. The third is I'm still going to be in office till May. And there's a hell of a lot of stuff going on in the South Loop. So I figure I can still help you a lot. And
Sure.
so I'm committed for that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And then,
Now, do you want to go forward now on one of those state appointments?
no, I think it's best after I left in May. So
Yeah.
at the end of the year,
Yeah.
if you can help me with that, that would be good.
At the end of the year or May, June?
No, I think I want it to look good. I think at the end of the year,
Calendar year.
Calendar year, yeah.
All right, okay. But you should get me like a resume.
Yeah,
Just get me.
I'll start working on it
Yeah,
now,
right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Because I want to have a meeting with Pritzker the week after next.
I was going to ask you about that, because we're setting up meeting. I'm working with the Chewy, George, Rick group. I don't want to mention it myself, unless he and I were alone. I would, but with the group, I don't want to mention it. So I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I want to let Pritzker know what's coming.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't have to be in writing. I can just verbally tell them, look, as we go on with these boards and commissions, and I'll monitor what goes on with the boards and commissions.
Okay.
We're doing that already.
Okay.
We're sending names over. And I'll ID certain, there's less than 10, maybe less than 5.
Yeah, actually, they've asked, Juan Ochoa has asked me to put a group of names. My daughter is a regional park supervisor, and there's 3 regions. Because the mayor's not going to be there anymore, I'm going to give her name to Pritzker too, to Juan Ochoa to give to her.
Okay. You should give it to me too.
Okay.
Pretty incredible to kind of, lift that veil and see conversations happening amongst powerful people, dealing with high-paying taxpayer positions and dealing with steering business to private law firms and a whole host of other things. How to deal with other officials who ended up, being guilty of corruption. And the case continues. So get the headlines at thecentersquare.com. Our reporter Jim Talamonte back in there. We'll connect with him later on this week to get another update because the fireworks definitely flying in that courtroom. All right, it's Illinois in Focus Daily. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and wake up with us each and every weekday morning. Well, it's a jam-packed show. We've got, of course, the election results going to be made final today. We'll check that out. Tomorrow, we'll review some of what State House Republicans continue to raise as concerns of drugs getting into Illinois prisons, and a detailed response from the Illinois Department of Corrections. So we'll share that with you tomorrow. We'll also watch what happens with the gun ban litigation in the appeals courts, and deadline today for plaintiffs to file a response as to why they shouldn't kick the case back down to the district court for more clear judgment, the appeals court says, and also what's going to happen with the stay, which is going to be lifted come December 8th or 9th. So we'll watch that as well. Be sure to wake up with us each and every weekday morning, the Illinois in Focus Daily. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and get the podcast anywhere you get podcasts. Don't forget, thecentersquare.com, where you can get the daily newsletter. And you can also read the headlines about Biden pardoning Biden. Is another Biden pardon in the works for the president's brother? Wow. Be sure to read up on that at thecentersquare.com. Have a great day. We'll be back at it tomorrow for Illinois in Focus Daily.